The gospel for today comes from the 8th chapter of Mark, beginning with the 27th verse. Jesus went on with his disciples to the villages of Caesarea Philippi, and on the way he asked his disciples, "Who do the people say that I am?" And they answered him, "John the Baptist, and others, Elijah, and still others, one of the prophets." He asked them, "But who do you say that I am?" Peter answered him, "You are the Messiah." And he sternly ordered them not to tell anyone about him. Then he began to teach them that the Son of Man must undergo great suffering and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. He said all this quite openly, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But turning and looking at his disciples, he rebuked Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan, for you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things." He called the crowd with his disciples and said to them, "If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their lives will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake and for the sake of the gospel will save it. For what will it profit them to gain the whole world and forfeit their life? Indeed, what can they give in return for their life? Those who are ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of them the Son of Man will also be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels." Here ends the reading. That pen is just going to stay on the floor. You may be seated. I might wait just a second. It's just on time, isn't it? Written time for the sermon. It doesn't sound too bad. Back in the day, when you wanted to do research, there was this building you could go to. It was called a library. There you could find books called encyclopedias that would tell you everything from A to Z. One of my first jobs out of college was at the Commonwealth Journal in Somerset, Kentucky. I remember visiting the library a lot. I ended up making friends with one of the librarians who was around my age. Her name, ironically, was Linda. At that time, people would call the library with all kinds of questions. Linda and the other librarians would put the calls on hold and quickly find the answers for people. They were always so nice and polite. I remember one day, Linda was working at the library alone. Well, a few friends of ours thought it would be funny if we disguised our voices and called her with the most ridiculous questions. One by one, we called. I don't think she suspected anything at first, but when it was my turn, I think she realized something was up. I remember my query as well as her reply. "I have a question," I said in my fake voice. "I don't know if you can help me." "I'll try," she replied. "What's your question?" "How many fish are there in Lake Cumberland?" I asked, trying not to giggle. "I don't know, Linda," she said. "Why don't you go out there and start counting?" These days, I could probably go on Google and find out the answer to that question. You can Google just about anything. I use it all the time to find out recipes. I'll pick up some produce that I've never had before and I'll say, "Let's see what we can do with this." Or if I have a question about dogs, it's my go-to for basic information, especially if I can't get Sue Whitaker on the phone right away. The other day, I wanted to remove a seat in my van because I had to take a lot of dogs to Charleston. I Googled it and I found a very helpful video. Now I have to go back to Google and look for a video to see how to put the seat back in. Or I might have some help. There was no Google back in Jesus' time. So when Jesus asked his disciples who the people said that he was, they didn't have anywhere to turn. They had to answer that question themselves. They did have the benefit of firsthand information, though. They'd been traveling around with Jesus as he was preaching and teaching and healing folks. They saw him take a small amount of food and feed a crowd of people, not once, but twice. First 5,000 people, and then 4,000 people. And right before today's gospel reading, they saw him heal a blind man by spitting in his eyes. Just imagine the chatter in those crowds. Did you see what Jesus just did? That was amazing. This isn't just some regular guy. So, when Jesus asked his disciples, "Who do the people say that I am?" they were pretty quick to answer. John the Baptist, Elijah, one of the prophets. Of course, none of those were the right answer. And Jesus had a follow-up question. "Who do you say that I am?" Peter answered right away, "You are the Messiah." Bingo! Peter got it right. But what did Jesus say then? It probably wasn't the answer the disciples were expecting. He ordered them, "Shh, don't tell anybody." It wasn't time yet. There was more to be done before Jesus' true identity and mission could be revealed. First, he had to prepare his disciples for what was to come. He outlined how he would undergo great suffering and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days, rise again. Can you imagine being with Jesus in that room when he said all that? Would you have been nodding your head and thinking, "Okay, sure"? Or would you have been like Peter, taking Jesus aside and saying, "Hey man, don't talk like that"? What was Peter's reaction? What was Jesus' reaction to Peter then? He turned to him and said, "Get behind me, Satan. You're setting your mind not on divine things, but human things." Satan? Wow. Just a few minutes earlier, Peter said Jesus was the Messiah, and Jesus was patting him on the back, saying he had the right answer. Now, Jesus was calling Peter out. Not only did he call him out, he called him Satan. Of course, if you look at it from Peter's point of view, he didn't want to lose his teacher, his friend. The problem was that he wasn't seeing the big picture. Jesus was sent to earth for a mission that had to be accomplished. If he didn't suffer and die, all would be lost, something that would make Satan very happy. Jesus' end game wasn't on earth. It was in heaven. Life on earth has an end, but life in heaven is everlasting. Jesus continued to talk to his disciples, calling the crowd to join them, and he issued them an invitation. "If anyone wants to become my follower, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me." That's not an easy task. How do you leave behind everything you know and love to go into the unknown? It takes faith. So what exactly is that? What is faith? Well, the word faith comes from the Latin word fidere, which means to trust. For the disciples, they had to trust that what Jesus was telling them was going to happen, even if they didn't want it to. In our day and time, we have to trust in the power of the cross. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. Amen.